Get Commissioner Powell to do our invocation, please.
Would you pray with me, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity of assembling here today to conduct the business of Person County. Pray that you will be our guiding light as we make those decisions. May they be in the best interests of Person County and the advancement of the county. And Father, we pray for your blessings on these young people that are involved in our meeting today. Bless their lives, give them insight and direction, for we know that they will be the leaders of tomorrow. And we pray your rich blessings upon them. These things we ask in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any adjustments of the agenda?
Move for approval.
Excuse me, here in just a second, please. We got an adjustment for agenda title, call for a public hearing on intent to sell home health and hospice services. The board has previously discussed to explore the feasibility of selling the county Medicare certified home health and hospice operations, and North Carolina law Chapter 131E provides for a detailed procedure to sell such assets with a substantial amount of opportunity for public input. Could I ask that we approve the agenda with this added on as item number 10, please?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll approve the agenda with adding of the home health and hospice sale. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Getting ahead of myself. Today is Local Government Day. I want to thank you guys for coming and being a part of our meeting today. I hope that you guys take something away from this and be able to discuss it in the future. If any time you need anything from any one of us, all of our numbers are posted and our emails are on the county website. I'm Tracy Kendrick. I'm the chairman of the board. I'm working on my 4th year as a board member here, and have really learned a lot about the county and how the county works, and hope that someday you guys will be a part of our county government. And to my right is Vice Chairman Powell. And if you'll introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. As the chairman has said, my name is Gordon Powell, vice chair of this board. Just in my 2nd year here, but 12 years previously on the school board, so I would know some of you people from that perspective. And my only comment to you young people is to be involved with local government. Get involved, be involved, take action in and around through your schools and committees and opportunities, and be a part of what goes on, because you are our leaders tomorrow. Take it from an old guy, that won't be long. You'll be there, so take advantage of it and be a part of your community, and express your concerns and take care of your needs. Thank you so much for being here today.
Commissioner Puryear.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Want to thank you all for being here today. My name is Kyle Puryear. I'm been a member of this board for the past 12 years. It's certainly a learning experience, and I hope that you will find something that you take away, because you will be the young leaders of tomorrow. Back in 1998, I was sitting right where you're sitting right now in Local Government Day, and it intrigued me, and I hope it intrigues you as much as it did me, and welcome you here today.
Commissioner Clayton.
I'm Jimmy Clayton. I'm probably the longest serving member on the board at this time. This is my 18th year. I'm from the Timberlake area. I was born and raised in Person County. As some of the others have already said, I hope y'all will get interested in local government and look at what they do. A lot of the things you hear on television and radio about the state and the federal government and what all is going on up there, but on the local level, we're the ones that where a lot of your local things go on, your sheriff's department, your fire departments and all the other departments that are on the local level are funded through this Board of County Commissioners. So get interested in local government and keep an eye on what we're doing. Like I said, you're our future leaders. And I don't know what your plans are for the future. And while we're all big sports fans for different schools, and some of them didn't do so well this year, but still, you go to college somewhere or go to school somewhere or go to community college, get that extra piece of paper. It'll certainly help you down the road.
Mr. Jeffers.
Hi, I'm Ray Jeffers. I'm the youngest member of the board. Thought I'd add that in there. I'm in my 10th year, third four-year term. 10 years ago, I was the youngest person ever elected in the county at 25. I also had the distinct pleasure of serving as president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners for the entire state, and I was the youngest commissioner, youngest president the association's ever had with that. So never think that your age is a deterrent or what you feel may be needed in your community doesn't matter. Two things I want to tell you is don't think just because you're not old enough to vote that we don't listen to you. We make decisions today that will not only affect you all tomorrow, but it will affect the child that's not born yet. And so please pay attention to your current events, especially at the local level. I know we see a lot of stuff on the national news, but a lot of stuff that we do right here affects you a little bit closer and a lot sooner than what you might see on CNN or something like that. Second thing is, how many of you all will be 18 before November 6th? Any of y'all going to be 18 before then? Well, if not, tell your colleagues or your friends that this is an election year. And a lot of kids think they have to be 18 to vote. But if you will be 18 before November 6th, you can vote in the May primary at the age of 17, but you still have to register to vote. So remember that when it comes your time, it's election year, and it's very important for you to exercise that right.
Could I say one other thing?
Certainly.
As a reminder, I see young people out here, and I think youngest to oldest. I would suggest you two, in your relationship with each other and other people in the community, do so with utmost respect and honor, because you never know who's going to be on the other side of the table or on the same side of the table with you in the future. I was reminded the other day that 20 years ago, almost to the month, I was on an airplane to a national convention to Kansas City, Missouri, with this young man. Mr. Perrier was on the airplane as a student at Person High School 20 years ago. So you never know how life is going to revolve or change and come around and keep you in. So again, treat each other with respect and honor, because what goes around comes around. Thank you.
So was that a positive thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, just making sure. You didn't ever say, so I was just making sure.
You passed the test.
Clerk.
Good morning. Welcome to our meeting today. My name is Brenda Reeves. I serve as the clerk to the board, and in that capacity, I work for the elected officials. And also, I serve as the executive assistant to the county manager. So I work for the county manager, Heidi York, also. Thank you.
Assistant County Manager. I did it last time. I didn't want to miss you this time.
Hi, my name is Sybil Kate. I'm the Assistant County Manager. I report to Heidi York, our County Manager. And my role is to oversee the 8 departments that I work with. So basically, you've never been to Parks and Rec activity. Okay, how about the library? So those are some of the departments that I supervise, and it looks like most everybody's touched by at least those 2 departments. So thank you for being here, and like they've all said, please be involved in your local government.
Ms. York.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Heidi York. I serve as the county manager here. I'm in my 10th year as county manager, and I am appointed by the 5 elected officials. So I get the best of both worlds. I get to be engaged and involved with politics, but I don't actually have to run for office, which is nice. So I get to work closely with them, and then I get to work closely with our department heads. We have about 25 department heads who are running various services through our community, and I get to work with both of them. So each county in North Carolina has a county manager, so there are 99 other people like me performing this job across the state, and every day is a challenge. Local government is a way that you can make a difference in your community. So we really enjoy the work that we do, and thank you for being here this morning.
Our county attorney, Ron Aycock, is running a little bit behind, so at the end of the meeting today, probably when we do our report outs, we'll let Ron talk a little bit about what he does for the county. So just keep in mind that one person is meeting and that we'll put him in at the end of the agenda. Next on the agenda, item number 1 is a resolution of appreciation. Is Judith Akers? Good morning. Resolution of appreciation. Whereas Judith Akers has served the people of Person County during her tenure as social work program manager with the Department of Social Services, and whereas Judith Akers has served the citizens of Person County with honor, integrity, sincerity, and dedication, providing accurate, concise service for 35 years, February of 1983 to February 2018, and whereas Judith Akers has earned the respect and admiration of all who have known her and worked with her throughout her career, and whereas the County of Person recognizes the many contributions of Judith Akers has made to the county and offers her sincere best wishes for her retirement. Now, therefore, I, Tracy L. Kendrick, Chairman of the Person County Board of Commissioners, do hereby extend this resolution of appreciation to Judith Akers for continually striving to make Person County and Roxborough a better place to live and work. Adopted this day, the 19th day of March, 2018. Thank you.
So I have thought about this a long time, and I decided I was going to say one last story for Ray. I always gave him a good story, and then I realized he needs to just wait and read the book. But it's been a journey. There's been some smooth roads. There's been some potholes. There's been some storms, and there's been some really sunny weather. It's been a great ride. And so I just want to say that I'm grateful. I wish Mr. Aycock was here. He's been a very big support to us, and I wanted to say that to him.
Right.
But I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be in Person County.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say I'm the chairman of the DSS board, and on behalf of our director, Carlton Paylor, and the board, we are Carlton's not here because they have students there at the department today, but that we are most appreciative for your service. Judy was a person that if you want to know what happened or why we're doing it this way or how we need to do it, she was the person to call. And I was fortunate enough to go to the Social Service Institute this year in October with her, and she is very well respected across the state as well, and we just appreciate her representing Person County so well for 35 years.
Thank you, Ray. Item number 2 on our agenda is a public hearing, a text amendment request by the Person County Planning Staff to amend the ordinance regulating automobile graveyards and junkyards regarding commercial and residential junkyards. Accept a motion to open a public hearing. We have a motion on the table to open the public hearing. Is there any comments? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? All right, Ms. Oakley.
Good morning. If I could get my presentation, thank you. To give you a little bit of background on first of all, let me state that all state and local statutes have been met for this public hearing. To give you a little bit of a background on this text amendment, while working on 2 current junkyard violations, staff discovered some language in the junkyard ordinance that was contradictory. While Section 6, applicability, of the junkyard ordinance states that the ordinance applies to all properties, residential, commercial, and industrial, Section 4, prohibitions, only prohibits commercial junkyards. I discussed this issue with Mr. Aycock, the county attorney, and in order for the junkyard ordinance to clearly apply to all properties within the county, and specifically to residential properties, we came to the conclusion that a text amendment was needed. The first part of the text amendment is to amend the definition of a junkyard and to also add a definition for a residential junkyard. I looked at several junkyard ordinances across the state and ultimately went with the definitions from Chatham County and Lincoln County. Both were similar. The commercial junkyard definition was primarily tweaked to add verbiage about junk cars that are abandoned at automobile repair shops. The residential junkyard definition was added, and it was based upon the definition, again, from Chatham and Lincoln counties. If a residential property has an area of 600 square feet or greater of junk as defined in the ordinance, then it is considered a residential junkyard. Under Section 4, staff is proposing to remove the word commercial in front of junkyard, so again, it applies to all junkyards, commercial and residential. Staff also determined that the penalty section was unclear and that both criminal and civil penalties could be applied to a parcel regardless if it was zoned residential or commercial. Staff is recommending that criminal penalties only apply to non-residential properties, and civil penalties in accordance with the North Carolina general statutes can apply to both. As you can see on the screen, again, staff is not proposing to change any of the existing language, but rather to relocate it in the ordinance to a better section and to add that criminal penalties shall only apply to parcels used for commercial purposes. Planning staff recommends approval of TA 01-18. Staff is requesting language in the ordinance that clearly distinguishes between a commercial and residential junkyard, along with the associated penalties for each. The North Carolina General Statutes requires that when reviewing a text amendment, the board also consider in their motion a statement as to whether the proposed text amendment is reasonable and consistent. Staff feels that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future planning goals and objectives of Person County. It is reasonable and in the public interest as it will provide clear and concise regulations in the ordinance regulating automobile graveyards and junkyards. Section 4.1.10 in the Goals and Objectives section of the Land Use Plan continues to state that you shall evaluate and regulate offensive land uses that create unsightly conditions and adversely affect adjacent property values. In particular, pursue vigorous enforcement of the Person County Junkyard Ordinance. If you have any questions of me at this time, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from our board?
Why would you change the criminal penalties shall apply only to parcels used for commercial purposes? Why? What was your thought on that?
It is my understanding that the intent when this was first written was to apply to commercial properties. And as I started reviewing the two cases that I talked about with the attorney, as it's currently written, the ordinance gives you the option of whether to apply criminal or civil. And hearing that the original intent was to apply criminal solely to commercial properties, where civil penalties would apply to residential, staff just felt that it would be better to clarify it in the ordinance. And that's my understanding that that's what has been done previously in the past with junkyard violations.
That's the way it's been handled.
Yes.
So what issues came from these two cases that prompted this?
So I was drafting violation letters, and it got to the point where I was discussing them with the attorney because they were not clearing up their property. And upon further review of the ordinance, discussing the penalty section, we also realized that the way the ordinance is currently written under prohibitions, junkyards on residential properties are not prohibited. And those were the two particular cases that I was working on. Two residential properties that have houses and have accumulation of junk. So as it's written, I did not feel comfortable taking this a step further with the attorney, so we discussed a text amendment.
My understanding, Ray, was that the word commercial kept it from being part of the ordinance itself, and that's why we went in and did the residential part of it. It was mainly speaking to commercial, what it could do, the penalties and all of that, and so most of this text amendment is bringing in the residential, am I right?
That's correct.
What if I have a commercial junkyard and then my residential is the lot next door, and some of it happens to spill over across the line?
We treat each parcel on a parcel-by-parcel basis. So both would be in violation. Again, under the penalty section, though, we could pursue criminal penalties on the commercial property, whereas we would go after civil penalties on the residential.
All right, what if I take it down to the farm and put it on the backside where nobody can see it?
All of our junkyard complaints are violation complaint driven, so we do not go out and ride the county looking for violations. They are all
That was my next
complaint driven.
question.
Under Section 3, visible, it states capable of being seen without visual aid by a person of normal visual acuity. So I hope that that's what's
All right.
used and not someone riding around
A
looking.
few years ago, we had something like this come up, and we had several of your antique car type people come in, and their concern was that they may have parked cars that, may not be registered, or oftentimes not. They're just using them for parts and stuff. So what constitutes junk? I mean, I see where it says parcel of land and junk materials, but, one man's junk could be someone else's treasure.
It is, and unfortunately, we would have to go by the definition of junk. What I have found, though, and with some of the cases that I'm already working with, is just working with the people to even relocate it on the property, maybe screen it, maybe put it in the backyard. I've been successful in those cases in relocating items if neighbors are concerned about the visibility of it from their property.
We've been dealing with this issue off and on over the last many years. And often when we change something for good intent, that has unintended consequences involved here. What are some of the unintended consequences? Has the planning board given thought of unintended consequences of this?
Planning board or planning staff?
Planning staff,
Planning
planning
staff.
board.
Well, as it's currently written, as I said, I think there would be more of an unintended consequence if it wasn't amended. Because as it's written today, I can apply this ordinance to commercial properties. I've got 7 open junkyard cases that are residential. Then I'm working with them verbally to try to get them to clean up their property, but right now I have no enforcement mechanism the way the ordinance is currently written. So I think there would be an unintended consequence that if the text amendment were not adopted, then I could verbally try to work with these people, but there's no enforcement mechanism to get them to clean up. So kind of the opposite. I think there's more if an unintended consequence if it's not amended. If it is kept the same, then we would be looking at commercial properties. We do have one violation. Right now, that is a commercial property, that's an automobile repair shop that does currently meet the ordinance that we could work with them on cleaning up their property.
So
Ms. Oakley, I do have a question. In the beginning, you mentioned, used the words at auto shops. Now, what does that, what's the difference in at an auto shop versus a junkyard?
So an automobile repair shop, and that's why we tweaked the definition of commercial junkyard to state that if there's an abandoned vehicle there for a period of 90 days or more. And this is very common in other jurisdictions I've worked, because at the 90-day point, if someone has not come and retrieved their vehicle, then the owner of the automobile repair shop typically goes through the process to get that vehicle removed. So what we're looking at are unlicensed, unregistered vehicles that are just sitting there left abandoned. If they're being worked on, they're not a junkyard or an automobile graveyard. But if they're just sitting there, and a lot of times it is the people who don't have the funds or for whatever reason do not pick up their vehicles, then at that point, over the 90-day period.
Okay.
Any further questions?
So just go right down through this. We've got a lot of red in here. How does it affect existing businesses?
Existing businesses, so again, it would really apply to commercial properties. In particular, the one that jumps out at me is automobile repair shops. So if they have vehicles that are there for a period of greater than 90 days. And again, in my many years of working with this, the owners of those repair shops do not want the vehicles sitting on their property for more than 3 months. They can go through the process to then acquire those vehicles. So we do have that one that I talked about. that has been storing vehicles. They recognized that we went out to the site, and that's what we typically do when we get a notice. We go out and talk to the owner, and he recognized that it was becoming junky, and he was storing cars there that were not licensed. So again, we are working with them on getting it fenced. Other than that, I don't see where it would impact existing businesses because the ordinance already applies to existing commercial businesses. It's the residential that it doesn't cover clearly.
What defines you, let's say, if you run a sole proprietorship or just an unincorporated business, and it's just a car repair, and you have 3 or 4 cars on it, but you're running out of your home, you don't have a business sign on it. Does that constitute you as a commercial property?
As a commercial property, if you're running a business, it's a fine line because we no longer have business licenses in the state. That was an easy, clear definition to distinguish residential from commercial. I think we would, again, the first step is to always work with them. And the goal is to get them to clean up their property or to screen their property. And it might be that those are vehicles that they're working on. If that's the case, that they're actively working on those vehicles, then we're not going to pursue any type of violation enforcement. So again, it'd be really on a case-by-case basis. And that one, if they're working on the vehicles, I mean, unless they're parked out front up on cinder blocks, without tags or something, again, that makes it visible that we get the complaint, then we probably would not be out there.
How many current businesses would be affected? Like, let's say we grandfathered in, how many would be grandfathered? Do we know?
There's probably a lot of businesses out there that I'm not familiar with. I mean, the only one that I can think of is the one that we are actively working with right now. That jumps out at me, but I don't know how many existing auto repair shops there are in the county.
My only question is, under the appeals process, it's letter F under section 10. I appreciate the fact that they've got it in here that a person who may be residential or business could appeal to the Board of Commissioners, and then we as appointed elected officials can look at the situation and determine whether or not our planning department has served papers correctly. So I appreciate the fact that it's in here, but I don't understand the meaning behind unless the owner is a chronic violator. So is this in here to, and I'm making the assumption, is this in here to keep the person from continuing to come before the Board of Commissioners on the same project or on various properties?
So the appeal section is something that is being relocated but not changing from what was existing there. The reason that it has, unless the owner is a chronic violator, is because the North Carolina general statutes specifically addresses chronic violators. And if you are served notice of 3 times within 1 calendar year, then we have to follow the state guidelines.
Got it.
So that is why they don't have the option to come before.
No need in us putting a law or rule in when the state's already defined it.
Correct.
Gotcha. Any further questions, concerns? Do we have nobody from the public for comments? Are there any further questions before we ask for closure on the public hearing? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Any discussion on closing public hearing? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Item number 3, consideration to grant or deny the request for text amendment or amend the ordinance for automobile graveyards and junkyards. If anybody was here when we went through this the last time, you'll remember that I wasn't a very big fan of this ordinance. I have seen over the course of the last 3 years several situations where people have been in residential neighborhoods, and it has benefited the neighbors. I think Ms. York actually rode out to a property in the Timberlake area and took care of some issues that were going on out there, and I've had quite a few people messaging me, emailing me about issues, and I think some of them are projects that Ms. Oakley's on, so I've kind of grown to appreciate this ordinance more than I did in the past, and I certainly consider the ramifications of us doing an overreach and getting into people's private property rights. But I do see where it has helped, and I don't see where we've had any overreach from county government. So that's my thoughts on this. Anyone else have anything to say about it?
Mr. Chairman, I know your previous opinion on this, and we differed a little bit on it, and it sounds like we're crisscrossing a little bit today now, because I do, I did support it, and I do worry about overreach and unintended consequences, and had a few calls from businesses concerning this issue, so I will be opposed to this amendment.
Any further discussion?
I understand, when we discussed it earlier, because I get a lot of complaints about people who have 1,000 lawnmowers out there in their front yard. And I understand people's concern about property value and how their community looks. My concern is I just don't have a good handle yet on how this might affect current businesses. So I think if I was asked to vote on it today, I would actually make a motion to table it until next month. And then that way we can make sure we have all questions answered, because as Kyle said, there sometimes can be unintended consequences. I mean, we just looked at this in 2015, and all of a sudden already we're back making amendments. And so, so I think it deserves just a little bit more looking into. I'll reserve my motion until everybody has their comments, if they have any.
So yours and Kyle's concerns is more about the commercial part of it versus the residential and any unintended consequences related to it?
Yes.
I was a little bit concerned. Nobody from the industry spoke today, so I would kind of be in agreement if we held off till the next meeting and see if we get any kind of reaction. Sometimes people don't realize what you're doing until you're already doing it. So
generally, we try to have some of these too. I know we've been caught up with our meetings because of everything this past 2 months, but generally we try to have some of these at 7 p.m. meeting that gives people who are off time to come and speak, and it's hard for people to come at 9 in the morning. And so, when you're ready, I'll offer that motion to table.
Would you guys please touch base with your commercial businesses and let them know, and hopefully we'll have some folks from the community come in and discuss that. So, any other discussions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
All right, I'll move to table this.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to table this until the first meeting in April. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We're going to table it. We have anyone signed up for informal comments? No informal comments. So item number 4, discussion, adjustment, and approval of the consent agenda. Is there any adjustments or discussion on the consent agenda? Okay. Entertain a motion to accept it. All right, we got a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. New business, item number 5, volunteer fire department funding. Ms. York.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is an item that we've been discussing for many years, as you're aware. Your most recent discussion related to the funding that you appropriate for the volunteer fire departments was at your board retreat back in February. At that time, there were 2 proposals being discussed among the board. One is to have a ballot referendum for a quarter of a penny for sales tax to be increased that would be used to help fund your volunteer fire departments. The other is to create a new source of revenue in a fire tax, and that would be an alternative way to fund your volunteer fire departments. So at the board retreat, it was asked that we bring the discussion back to the board today. Of course, the ballot referendum is going to not happen until May 8th, but we can certainly look at the other scenario this morning, which is to create a fire tax, and then the discussion really starts with the amount of funding that the board would want to designate for volunteer fire departments. So you received from the Fire Chiefs Association a proposal which would increase their funding by about 76%, so that would require $512,000 of new revenue to fulfill that request. I'll remind you that you're currently funding the volunteer fire departments at a level of $669,885 annually, with all of that coming out of your general fund. So if you simply wanted to shift the funding to a fire tax, which would relieve your general fund, we would be talking about a fire tax of 1.82 cents just to keep the funding flat, which obviously does not fulfill the need that has brought this item before you, which is to increase the funding for volunteer fire departments. So the first item, I guess, that the board would need to decide is how much funding would you like to appropriate next year? And then we could figure out where that money could come from if it was indeed you wanted to pursue the fire tax. Of course, this is part of your annual budget process, which we are right in the middle of now, reviewing departmental funding requests. And I'll be proposing a budget to you all at your meeting in May. So I'm not sure if this is something you'd prefer to decide now, in which case this decision will impact all funding recommendations here on out, particularly if it involves general funds. So what questions can I answer for you? Where would you like to start on this discussion?
Well, I think the board I'm the representative on the Chiefs Committee, and the board has thrown out there, take to them. I think Commissioner Gordon Powell threw it out there at the retreat to what if we could do like $1 million baseline. And I've had that conversation with him, as I think other commissioners, and I think if we can get to that $1 million baseline,
sure,
from our 669 to the $1 million baseline, they would be willing to sign contracts and work with us on that.
Okay.
Also keeping in their staggered 2% increase, staggered with the city of Roxborough.
Sure. Sure.
If I had my preference to get that $1 million, I would get it entirely from the fire tax. Just given your comments of we're in the budget season, we know we have to, we're going to be hearing quite a few requests. We know, given some of the things that our legislature is going to put on our schools, that there may be some healthy requests coming from them in the near future. And I think it's, we've been very fiscally responsible over the years, and we have not raised taxes in 11 years, but if the legislature is going to continue to put unfunded mandates on us, and we're going to continue to grow as a community and as a county, I think we'll see some increase in some of our departmental budgets. I just don't know where we're going to find all of that money if we don't hopefully get them out of our general fund and into a fire tax.
Okay. So with Commissioner Jeffers' proposal, we would be looking for an additional $330,000 to add to their current $669,000 to put you at a funding base of $1 million. If you were to do that all on the fire tax, as he is suggesting, you would be looking at a 2.72. I think your abstract says 2.71. It was just a matter of rounding. So you'd be looking at a fire tax of 2.72 cents to accommodate a $1 million funding level.
And what would that impact be to a median priced home in the county?
So the median price of a home in the county is $115,000. A 2.72 cent fire tax would increase that property tax bill by $31.28.
Now, when we heard from insurance companies earlier in the year that if they did not, these homes did not have fire coverage, their insurance rates would have increased from what to what?
None of them ever gave us a good, solid number. I think the most recent article in the paper also did not pinpoint a number. I can certainly make some phone calls and ask them. I think when we had looked at that maybe a year or so ago, it was around $100 difference on that value of a home.
So roughly $100. So that's obviously more than this $31.28 that we're looking at if we were to get them out of the general fund and fund it totally through a fire tax.
Correct. And that amount of funding gives them about a 49% increase in their annual.
What about the homes we have in what we call the no man's area, where they're really not 6 miles within a current station? They could possibly not even be able to get insurance. Would that be fair enough to say?
We already have some pockets. Even in the Timberlake District, we have some pockets that are a 10. So they are able to get insurance, but they're paying at the most expensive rate.
Highest premium?
Yes.
Patty, if we decrease the property tax rate to, I know you said we've had conversations, you can't get it a wash, but
Sure.
my conversations with a great many residents, they value the fire department services. However, they do not want a tax increase. And that's why that's why we're elected to make the hard decisions on that. And if you have a property tax decrease, what rate are we looking at to ensure that there is no increase across the board?
So the only amount right now that you could reduce the property tax rate by would be what you're currently paying out of general fund. So that $669,000 would allow you to reduce the property tax rate by 1.51 cents. That would preserve the fire department's funding as flat. So anything that you're looking for in addition has to come from somewhere.
Yes.
So
And
I
now
would
you-
need
the
a
million- Now we're
cut.
going off the $1 million request.
Right.
Okay. And what was that number, get 300?
The amount that you're needing to increase the funding by is $330,000 to get them to $1 million.
$330,000.
So you would need to cut the general fund
Okay.
in a recurring,
And under that 1.51% decrease,
a 1.51 cent.
decrease,
Yes.
are you assuring me with that number that there would not a single resident in this county could come and say, my tax bill went up?
The 1.51 cents is what you're currently funding the volunteer fire departments at. That's how much from your general fund.
Okay.
That's 669.
Yes, yes. Now, this is based on what 1 penny today
Okay.
yields you.
I want that.
So there is going to be a little bit of change in that as we get closer to that April 15th tax deadline when everyone is paying. So I will still have a little bit of change in what 1 penny generates. Like what I told you at the board retreat in February, that rate of 1 penny has since increased. So 1 penny right now brings you just a smidgen more.
Okay.
So the numbers will be adjusting slightly, but that would be enough to just take off what you're currently paying from general fund. If you put that in a fire tax, then you can save that on your property tax. Does that make sense?
So if we did that, where would you get the 330? If we did Kyle's proposal of just the 1.5,
Yeah, I'm
you're
not.
still looking for 330.
Without having reviewed all of the budget requests that are coming in for your fiscal year 18-19 budget, I cannot pinpoint right now.
Did any requests come in lower than last year?
No. No.
Okay. And you haven't got any firm figures on the agenda item that we just added for agenda number 10?
Correct. We won't have any bids back probably until late summer, early fall, well into the fiscal year. So we will not be able to appropriate those savings up front.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but I didn't know if you had an estimate of what they were looking at there.
We don't. I mean, we don't even know if we'll get any bids at this point. It's our hope that we will. We've
Okay.
not seen that be the case elsewhere.
So some of the fire department's concern, as I understood it, was not only the need for increased funding, but also they understand that the fire tax could be set at 0 or at 1 cent or whatnot, so it could be a cut based off whatever future board sets that rate. But I think some of the concern was they wanted to kind of get this out of our general fund and into a fire tax to where they can see what's in that pool of money for them, and not kind of based off what we feel like funding. I kind of put it towards vehicles. We kind of took vehicles out of our hand because when we went through the budget time, it was easy to grab that car from the sheriff department or the truck from animal control to fund something else that we wanted to when that really was needed. And we found ourselves in that situation, I think, now with our ambulances. And we already know, without any budget sessions, that last year we funded 4 of 8 new EMS positions, so that means we have to do 4 this year. We took on a borrowing for 3 new ambulances, and we already know there was some increased public safety costs other than the volunteer fire departments that's going to be coming our way. And I just don't know, one, where we're going to find this $330,000 or some of the funds to accommodate some of the other requests that we have coming in. And so I would hate that we would handicap ourselves already, shorting ourselves $330,000 to work with in the coming budget year, when we could easily get it from the fire tax at a cost lower than what it would cost the homeowner if they did not have fire coverage when it comes to their homeowner's insurance. And I have not heard, I've seen a handful of complaints on Facebook, but overwhelmingly most of the comments were in the fire department's favor in supporting a fire tax. I think last year or year before last, I had brought up raising the property tax to fund the volunteer fire departments. And what I heard there was, if you raise our property tax, we're fine with that if it goes to public safety. And this is a way to show the taxpayer with a fire tax that, yes, their tax bill may increase for that $31, but it is for public safety. We're not making a slush fund to go fund pet projects or to fund something that, that they're not in favor of. And I think that shows the taxpayer that we're being responsible with their money, that we're doing exactly what they said, that yes, if we do set this fire tax, that money will be used for public safety.
Ray, let's use a word that we don't hear very much nowadays, bipartisan.
Yeah.
Bipartisan. And so I think we're all in agreement of getting the fire departments the funding. And we look at giving up a little bit. You talked about, I know Commissioner Powell was looking at the his original proposal did not include a fire tax. It was just increasing the funding at that point. I understand the need, and I understand why the fire departments want a fire tax, a guaranteed fund, saying that it's not coming out of the fire departments, even though the commissioner or any future commission board can change that rate at any point in time, so nothing is guaranteed. But I think we have a consensus of this board that is willing to reach that $1 million total and will move to have a fire tax. But one thing, a promise that I have made to this county and to the citizens, and something that I've done for 12 years, and kids, students, if you ever plan to get elected, make sure you keep your campaign promises, because one thing I've always said, I will not support a tax increase on the property owners. So what I'm looking at doing is, if we can come to an agreement to where there will be a flat no increase across the board for the property tax owners, and the fire department still get their tax rate of fire rate, something we've never done before, in $1 million. At $330,000, we've got some work to do to look in the budget, but I think that it's that's just a figure that I think, with a little good work of hard work and some bipartisan agreement, I think we may be able to come to an agreement to make sure everybody's happy at the end of the day.
I think it's a common sense approach rather than a political one, you young people. As I said earlier, I've only been on this board a couple of years and kind of new at this. But I could say that I feel that I've done my homework and I've done my due diligence over the past year in making requests from departments about their needs and what they're faced with. And I've talked with those departmental leaders, and again, I think it's our responsibility as commissioners to do our due diligence and not increase taxes until we don't have any other alternatives. I think we do have an alternative. This, I would call it could be a transitional year where we'll make these make some changes, and I have confidence in these gentlemen that, you know, they're going to hold to their word. If they tell these fire departments, we're going to fund you $1 million, then we're going to do that. It's not going down next year. That was my original intent anyway, is to start at that figure, which was a little less than they had actually requested, maybe $150,000. Was that roughly right?
About how much they were asking for?
They asked for, and I said $1 million, but they asked for
1.2 million.
Okay, 0.2. At the same time, people from these departments have indicated to me that if that $1 million figure is firm, they can go about their planning. They can make their planning for buying the larger ticket items that they need, and over a span of 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, if that is a firm figure. And I still stick to that. I think we've got other pending actions by this board. We've got other options. Again, I think it's a good move on our part to do our due diligence first, use those options, then go another way. And again, I think this is a good transitional year to go with $1 million. I would also suggest, and I mentioned the 1 or 2, if they're $100,000 and some odd shy of the $1 million mark, that this board support them going forward by a matching amount of money for their community's fundraisers over the next year or two until we get this thing tweaked out and see how we could go. So based on documentation or data from your materials and data that you sent me, if we did a dollar per dollar match for, as I would term, community fundraisers and the stews and the barbecues and the chicken pickings and things that you'd like to do, that are true community actions and involvement, based on those numbers, it would come up roughly $120,000. So you're very, very close to what you asked for originally, if we were to do that sort of thing. So again, I think it's doable. It could come from the fund balance, and then at mid-year, we could do a budget amendment. Those things are certainly legal, and I think they're very doable. So I'm still very much in favor of moving forward with this.
Can I clarify a couple of points?
Sure.
I'm always reminded that what 1 penny on a fire tax generates is actually less than what 1 penny on the property tax generates, because we don't include the city. Mm-hmm. So it's not as clear as the $330,000 that we're looking for. That number actually grows a little more. It's somewhere around $447,000 I would be looking for from the general fund to get to that $1 million mark, because the pennies are not the same. So if you're looking for a sort of a neutral impact to the tax rate, you're going to be needing to come up with more money in the general fund to make that wash, if that makes sense. So I will tweak those numbers and get those out with the new penny rate, so we know how much we're looking for. So I just want to be clear that if you're creating a fire tax, but you're also paying the majority of it through your general fund, it's not really a true fire tax. The point of levying a fire tax is to free up your general fund and have a dedicated source of revenue. And so we would not be able to accomplish that with this proposal. It's still a hybrid funding that takes, the bulk from the general fund and does not alleviate that appropriation. So you're still back at the same point each year as a board, figuring out how are you going to find $447,000 in your general fund to continue as a recurring amount to your fire department. So I wanted to make sure that we understand that this is not really satisfying the dilemma that we have faced each year with a separate revenue source.
That's my concern. Because we're doing a fire tax to say, okay, yeah, we're going to please you and do a fire tax, but we're still funding you out of our general fund.
Right.
And so we still got to find that $1 million when it comes next year. or $500,000 to fulfill that promise. Now, if we're going to do a 2 or 3 year contract and say we're going to give you $1 million base, then we should just do a contract. Why are we even doing a fire tax? I mean, it's just like, see what my left hand's doing, but not my right. And I understand what Kyle's saying about being bipartisan, but none of us, when we gave our introductions, gave our party, because in the county, the local level, we hope you're just doing what's best for your community, and we're not like we up there on Washington, D.C., just fighting each other just because we have a D or an R beside our name. And so I understand with respect about making promises, but when you're in politics, things change in 10 or 12 years. And so, you know, sometimes you have to adjust. And right now, in our county, fire services and their needs have dramatically changed in 10 years that I've been on the board. And so I just feel like finding $447,000, we're committing ourselves to find $447,000 2 months before we even have probably our first budget hearing, or we even receive the budget request from you, not knowing what our departments are going to come in for. I mean, we have public safety needs, not just volunteer fire departments. We have EMS, we have sheriff. This is not going to be a flat budget request year. And we know, again, with our schools, that they're probably going to come in with additional requests. Our community colleges probably come in with an additional request. It's kind of hard to handicap yourself $447,000 2 months before you even know what your numbers are, when we can easily find it. And at $38, I mean, $31, people I've talked to in the community are willing to pay that for fire protection. You know, if everybody paid their $20-25 membership dues in their community, we wouldn't have that problem. And $31, that's a way of us getting it for them.
One of the things that I'd like to point out is we continue to talk about the median home value, but when we put a tax, a property tax on our citizens in Person County, it's just not median home value, it's all properties. And so when we talk about $31, that's fine if you've got a house that sits on a 1/4 acre of land that is $150,000, but there are multiple homeowners in the county that have a house that may be more or may have more property associated with it. So we don't need to get caught up on just median home value when we talk about a property tax increase. It affects people that have property that don't have houses on it. It also increases. We also need to keep into mind that we've still got on the ballot coming up in May the 1/4% sales tax increase, and so we have that on the board. As for the additional money, I agree. We've been talking about this, and if the board didn't have a commitment to it, we wouldn't have spent as much time as we have discussing it over the past 3 years, right? And there is a commitment from the board to get more money for public safety and making sure that we fund them appropriately so that they don't go away. But doing the hard work, we've got things that our county, I like to call them nice to do things, but not need to do things. Education, public safety, and business growth are 3 of the things that we need to continue to focus on. But just to get $300,000, we could go in and get it by cutting out the recycle center. That's a nice to have. That's something that I use weekly. I've said it before that I like having the recycle center there. But to get an additional $330,000, if we closed it down, took the CIP funding that we've got going towards it and the operation of it, $330,000 falls into that range, and we give it to public safety versus a nice to have. The other thing that I've been campaigning for is a renegotiation of the contract with the landfill. We currently get about $600,000 a year from the landfill. It's a licensed and permitted facility within our county, and they've came to us and asked to renegotiate their contract. If we went from 600 tons a day to 1,000 tons a day, we're looking at about a $1.19 million increase. Well, not an increase, it's about $510,000 increase over what we're currently getting. And that's not including the average daily cover. they're going to start paying us for the average daily cover. If we increase it by 2,000, up to 2,000 tons, then you're talking about $2.1 million. That's enough money to give the fire departments $1 million and $1 million for the education system without raising taxes on our citizens. So there is hard work that we can do, and there is agreement between the 5 of us that we need to do more for public safety and the fire departments. It's just a discrepancy in how we want to get it and how we get there. So I appreciate all of you guys and your opinions. I think it's good that our students and our community's here to listen to it so that they understand that there's not a consensus of not getting money. It's a consensus of where we get money from. And so with staff's help, I hope that we'll be able to move forward. You've taken some notes on what we're going to get to. And again, we are going to have increases this year. I've talked to Ms. York about it. We've had departments that we've held flat that really need funding. We've got the 4 new positions that we need to put in with the EMS. And so understanding that the public and students out there that it's a lot of hard work that goes into these budgets. It's a lot of thought. You can hear the questions, you can hear the proposals, and I think that we can get there. We have over the past 3 years that I've been on it, and we'll get there again this year. Let's just continue the discussions, and as Kyle said earlier, keep a bipartisan attitude moving forward on how we get there. And folks out in the community and sitting in here today, just remember, if you're for that 1/4% sales tax, then it comes up in May. We as a board will not endorse or deny support for that, but it's out there for the community to decide. And if it's, as Ray said earlier, that he hadn't heard any discussions, then you get to say so. You just don't get the commissioners sitting up here making a decision on how to spend your money on your behalf. So if you decide as a community, you can go out there and vote for that, and we figured it up. The 1/4% was going to get over $1 million. I think it's what the
like 700 some thousand.
We said between 600,000 and 800,000, so
So
I've
with
been
the
saying
existing budget.
700,000.
Yeah. So any further discussions on volunteer fire department funding? I think
Well, I hope we will come to some type of conclusion today, just because if we're going to be looking for 447,000, I think the manager needs to know that, and I think the fire department's, given that we don't need to show them a contract June 1st, we should hopefully try to get this solved today. At least some direction.
If you can agree to that direction and start the process, I'll be glad to introduce the motion forward.
Well, you want to introduce a motion? That's your right as commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to direct the county manager to increase funding to the local VFD fire departments to $1 million in scope from last year's appropriation. Well, not increase, but increase up to $1 million in scope. And to the shortfall for the $440,000, begin looking at in preparations out of the county budget.
So am I clear that you want to put what you can on a fire tax and then reduce the property tax rate by that same amount?
1.51 cents that was given.
Okay, so no new revenues, but increased spending.
See what we can find out of the budget and some other options.
That's tough.
I'll offer a substitute motion to set the fire tax rate at 2.72 cents.
Okay, we have a motion on the table and a substitute motion. Is there any discussion on the substitute motion?
I just, I think I've relayed enough to why I support us getting it all out of the fire tax, given our current budget year that we're going to face.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the substitute motion of increasing taxes and calling it a fire tax of 2.71?
That wasn't exactly my wording, but yeah.
But, I just want to be clear that it doesn't come out of the budget. That all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No. All right, substitute motion fails, 3-2. Back to the motion from Kyle per year of decreasing the property tax by
1.51
cents
cents, yes.
and combining it with the existing funding of $660,000.
Which that would be, and let me specify, that can be known as a fire tax,
Right.
the difference in there, which would equal up to $1 million.
And just for me to be clear, it would be considered a fire tax versus general fund.
Correct.
Okay, so for a total of,
I think we're a little confused. So we decrease the property tax rate by the $669,000. That's 1.51 cents off the tax rate. So your property tax rate becomes 68.49. Don't get hung up on this because it's going to change slightly, but then we create a fire tax with that $669,000.
With the difference that we just decreased the property tax by.
So that's about 1.82 cents on a fire tax.
Okay. And then you have the property, then you have the remainder that we had originally appropriated last year, which was, what was the appropriation for the fire department?
$669,885
All
is
right,
what they're
and
receiving now.
With that comes up to $1 million, correct?
No, so we would need an additional 330 from the general fund to make up. We could keep that in the general fund side, then we're creating a fire tax of 1.82 cents to get to $1 million.
Okay, 1.82 cents.
Okay. And you need to cut services by about 400,000 to create that $1 million base.
Come up with solutions. You're not going to cut services. We're the ones going to be voting on it, but come up with.
Right, propose
yes,
some cuts to your services.
Yes.
I'm clear.
okay, so my understanding of the motion is that we reduce it by 1.51 cents property tax, that Ms. York will come back with proposals on how to fund the existing departments and services and get it to us. Do you have a specific time?
It'll be part of my proposed budget.
Part of the proposal.
It'll be part of the
Okay.
budget.
Okay, so everybody got that? Know what we're voting on? I'm a little confused, but I think we're there. So, any further discussion?
So I will support this because I said I was going to support the fire departments and give them that $1 million base. I do not support cutting services when we have obviously other options out there. But since we are a couple of months out from our budget sessions, hopefully I can persuade some bipartisanship, as Kyle per year put it, to find other ways to fund this when we get to the budget.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the proposal, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, ayes have it. Item number 6, Person County Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, Ms. Pickett.
Do y'all have the budget? We're proposing that the county match the state funds, so you'd be spending $52,533 of county money to match. It's a 20% match. It's $222 increase from last year. The reason is we took some money out of the admin budget to fund more programming for the youth that are here today. And I do have a couple of points of interest. One is that we appreciate that Gordon comes with us, comes to our meetings. It helps to have a county commissioner there so he knows what's going on. And the other thing is that on December the 1st, 2019, the law is going to change. 16 and 17-year-olds will be considered juveniles now in the system. They are not. So you're going to see an increase probably in the sheriff's budget because he won't be able to house them in his jail. He'll have to house them elsewhere. That costs the county $122 a day for each one that we have to house outside the county. So just be aware of that, that change. It's going to cause an increase in your budgets. I'm just making you aware. I think that's part of what I should do as a juvenile crime prevention chair, is make you aware that that law is changing and that's going to cause some changes in budgets.
Any questions for Ms. Pickett? Okay, we've got a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the funding recommendation for 2018-19, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Ms. Pickett. Item number 7, mental health funding update from Ms. Tate.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a follow-up item. If you'll recall, Commissioner Jeffers asked for an update on how the refund money from Cardinal from 2016 was spent. We came to you in October, and you elected to provide funding for 4 projects for mental health. Those were a mental health pilot in the jails, naloxone kits and training for all of our first responders, a safer room at the hospital, and drug court. And the sheriff is here to give you details and answer any questions you might have about the jail pilot. And then I'll follow up with the other items.
Good morning, Commissioners. When we started back in December, after we found out there was some money available, we started reaching out throughout this state to see how and the best way to use this money. We found out there's very little of this being done. We have 2 or 3 things that's already set into place. It has taken some time, being that it's fairly new type of deal. There are some things out there that people that don't commit crimes that you can help with, but the ones that have actually committed crimes and already incarcerated, very little of this being done. But one thing that we do have in place, and it took some time to find these people, we have a peer support specialist that actually started this past Friday. That has only had 1 day of that, but it seemed to go well. To give you a little bit of background, we have a nurse in-house 7 days a week now. We were only doing 5 days, we increased to 7. So when we intake somebody, through the screening process, we already know the ones that has issues that we need to deal with. So they have actually been working with it some through the nurse. The way this is going to work now, the nurse makes a recommendation to the peer support specialist, who currently is going to be there 8 hours a week with us, and then 8 hours a week still in the county, still working through mental health to follow up on treatment. This person also not only is making recommendations to our next program, but it's also going to be the one that's going to be responsible for follow-up once they've gone through the court systems and they're out of our jail, to make sure they follow up with treatment. We already do our health through Southern Health Partners. We started talking to them. They do provide these type of services throughout the United States. That too is limited on what they do, but they have had experience in it. So when we reached out to them on what we wanted, there were some contract issues. We started this in December and January, and we have now a signed contract that they will be in place on about April the 12th. That was actually supposed to start March the 1st, but there was some verbiage in the contract that was not correct that we had to get straightened before we could get this started. The peer support specialist is a pilot program that's going to go from now to the end of June, and we're going to monitor that to see if we need to try to continue this, or if we can drop back to just this one. And it's going to depend on the funding and the outcomes of the programs that we got set into place. Any questions up to what we're doing at this point?
We heard a lot at our National Association of Counties report outs and stuff that this opioid issue is huge, not only in across the nation, but how does it impact Person County?
It is very huge. I think we've actually peaked and coming back down. We started seeing this many years ago. It does spill over into the jails. Like I said, the nurses that are there, the people that have come in that are addicted, they don't get the same type of treatment that they would get on the street if they wanted to do their own. But these people need to come down medically when they're on, so when incarcerated, they do get some type of treatments there to help them step down. It does not fulfill their desires of what they need when they was on the street, but it helps cut the edge off so they can deal with it and we can deal with them. The sad thing about the opioids, you know, what's out there to take the place next is heroin, and it's 10 times worse than the opioids. The counties that have already combated this, they're already seeing that the opioids and the meth is taking the place, and unfortunately it's cheaper than the opioids. There have been a lot of laws that have changed that have actually helped curb, you know, I think it just in January or end of last year, anybody has any major surgery used to get pretty much 50 to 100 high-dose pain pills. Now you only get like 2 to 3 days, and you only get, so all of that coming into place is really helping on the opioid situation. We know it, we already see it from other places already done this. All this is good in one way, is bad in another, because we're creating the next problem.
We heard also in the meeting that they're working with a lot of your national medical type associations, and that one of the number one prescribers of opioids, of overprescribing, were dentists. And so you go in with a toothache, you might only need a couple of days worth, but you get 30 days or 60 days, and so.
Well, and I don't doubt that that's not true, but some things that a lot of people don't realize, we've actually been working with SBI, who they have an assigned agents just for these people to prescribe these. They monitor. They've come to us, and we've actually worked with them throughout the states, and when they see one is doing a lot more than the other, they come in, and they've actually warned several doctors here in this county. They also tell us that, it's sad to say, but a lot of the abuse is coming from nurses. They're in between, and they're putting their certification and, you know, on the line by doing this, but you know, they found where some of them are actually replacing that type of medicines that a patient needs. They're taking it and then reselling it on the street or either using it. So.
Well, thank you for coming up with this. I just thought that would be a good use of that money, instead of just putting it back in the general fund, since it was originally to go out to help some of our mental health issues, and we know you're probably our biggest mental health provider in the county once they go up there.
we deal with it a lot, and I will tell you that the mobile crisis unit that is taking place, because this right here is going to work with the people that have committed crimes that have come to see us. There are some things out there that, you know, we deal with people on a daily basis and have to transport them from Murphy to Manio throughout the state wherever there's a facility, but some of this mobile crisis unit has stopped a lot of our transportations down because they're intervening and making recommendations for these people that have not committed crimes and get them the proper care that they need, you know, without us having to be as much involved.
Right. So I hope once we get our new DA that us, you, and the city and that DA office, we can come together and figure out some type of program, service before they get to you to help ward them all.
It is, and like I said, that's one of the you know, the mobile crisis unit is one of the things, you know, and it's sad to say, as me as an officer coming through the ranks, somebody that has an involuntary commitment, we have a duty that we have to go do. But one of the during my career, one of the times I probably they got on me is because I stopped a guy from running into Hyco Lake from killing himself. And once I got to him, and he told me his story, and he was ready to end his life, and he was willing to go voluntarily. I took him to get the help that he needed, but because it was voluntary and involuntary, I was the one that got in trouble. That's backwards. We're trying to help people that don't want help yet, but yet we can't help the ones that do want it. Right. So I agree that that's backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, for the 3 remaining items, just want to let you know the naloxone kits and the training, those have been distributed, and all of our first responders are trained. Knock on wood, we've only had to use them once, and it was successful, and a life was saved. For the safe room, the hospital is moving forward with that. They're hoping to have that equipment installed by April. And of course, drug court, we've given them those funds, and they're proceeding with expending those funds, and they have some data points that they've shared with you in the abstract. And on that note, I will turn it over to Rick Bruton, who is our Cardinal representative, because we received an additional refund from Cardinal, this time for $30,000. So he'll be providing you with some options for how you might want to use those funds.
Fire Department. Commissioners, ladies, thank you. So we've sat together, Sybil and I, over the last 2 years, we've seen some programs that have historically underspent, and I think she's got a good plan moving forward for FY19 to stop some of these refunds and get it out the first time and use it. So like you said, $30,000 was what was for last year, and I sent some information, a few lists of some things. Right off the top of my head was either increasing or extending some of those 4 programs you got, so helping the sheriff continue to do that and get a jump start for next year. One of the things that I'd like to see is some sort of community-wide training or something that can help. So JCPC, the local system of care collaborative, DSS, school systems, all those have this sort of overlap. So one of the things is a training, Seeking Safety is the name of it. It's an evidence-based program that addresses trauma and or substance use disorder. So you hit some of the opioid stuff on that too. Can be used for either or both, and those do go together a lot. It's not a cheap training. I think the standard daily rate is something like $2,600 a day plus travel. But we could set it up, or you could set it up, but we together set it up where you could do a day of sort of general public, so all those groups that I'm missing, JCPC, collaborative, schools, DSS, and sort of saturate the community. And the good thing about this, it's not specifically designed just for clinicians, so it's something that anyone can use. So, you know, in my head, you could do a day of that, sort of general public, and then maybe a second day or a half day, more intense just for the clinicians of the Freedom Houses and the other providers in the area. And that way you get a sort of a community base around this, and it's a good starting point to start and move forward. That's just one of my recommendations.
So we appropriate annual amount in the general fund to go to Cardinal Innovations to provide for mental health services for the needs of our residents. But the money is not being spent, and it's coming back to us.
Correct.
And we're not mental health providers. And so I think we're sitting here looking at ourselves going, how do we provide better services? Because we're hearing about the needs constantly, whether that be from youth in the schools or, you know, substance abuse and folks coming into contact with law. How do we get to a point where the money is going to those who need the services and the county is not in the mental health business, but we're trying to make those decisions?
So you guys put in a 320
Sure,
or 5 or something like that annually. And, you know, that's based on old statute that when there was county programs that sort of helped that fund, and it's just stayed in there. So what we want to do is use that money to support and help the services that we provide. So Medicaid and state funded, we do that, we've got that, but there's some things that you can't do with that. So, you know, things that support any social determinants of health. So housing, employment, some transportation stuff, all that stuff. You know, for programs that go to the schools, it's not a billable time when you do that, so help support some of the billable time. Getting psych services is super expensive, helping support that, training, stuff like that. And I would say, you know, this year we put in some money for indigent labs and meds, so people go to Freedom House, for example, that helps them pay for those things that we don't reimburse for. And, you know, we haven't expanded Medicaid, so usually if you've got Medicaid, you do that part, but for people that don't have that or insurance at all, it can become costly pretty quickly, especially when you're talking about medication-assisted therapy for things like opioid abuse. So that's, I want to see that money used for things to help support and continue wrap around kind of stuff for those services. It's not, you're not really buying services with that money. It's more about the local needs. And, you know, we had the past few years money that it was flex funds kind of, so for, you know, people that have behavioral health issues and maybe they went to jail for, you know, a couple months and they came back, they can't pay their light bill to get it turned on, you know, doing stuff like that. it was kind of underspent, so we shifted some of that stuff. And that's one of those things, I don't really feel comfortable about spending your money. You know, the opposite is like, I don't feel comfortable about spending your money in a way that I think's right. I need to talk to you guys to figure out what is the big, you know, thing here, how do you want to do it? So, you know, we've been working together about, you know, a lot of stuff to get some ideas and sort of set a base and then build from there.
So am I correct to assume we've already got the money back, that we're doing the pilot program and the safe room and all of that? Now we're talking about getting another $30,000 back?
Correct.
Oh, good. So what I would suggest is what you talked about, some type of public type training, and then something that between us and DS, you know, I say us, county as like DSS and health department, whoever needs to be players in that. Like you said, the sheriff department, the schools, some type of training for those couple of days. And then I will remind this board that this will be a great use of this money, is that we've got a group right now that's meeting to start some type of boys and girls type after-school club. They're working with the schools, you know, to actually do this in the school, at the elementary schools after school. Those kids would possibly receive a meal, have their homework finished, and go over several different types of programs. And I think that's where our money right now is best invested, is in our children. And if we can head them off to where they can come here and be as attentive as a lot of these children out here today, or young adults, that's a better bang for our buck in producing, I think, productive citizens here in the county right now.
We've also, we met last week, I believe, to discuss creating a crisis intervention team subcommittee, or, you know, local committee to help form the CIT and have CIT locally. You know, maybe using some of that to help. It's hard to get a lot of volunteer trainings, people to come in to volunteer to do the trainings. So maybe you could use some of that money to help pay for people to come from Durham or Raleigh or whatever to help with those trainings once you get them going. That's another thought that I'd had.
So what are the strings on the funding? Could we use it to support boys and girls after school, or is it supposed to be a little more tied to mental health?
It's very loose by statute, I will say.
Okay.
I would like to see it go towards anything that help, like I said before, help support mental health, substance use disorder, or intellectual developmental disability. Now,
So,
could you do that and have a program and have a sort of curriculum based on top of that? Then, yeah, I think that's
so explain to me why we're getting a refund then. I assume that we were, you know, we either gave too much money or it's money that you all didn't use that, you know, so I don't understand strings attached to it.
I would say it's not either of those. I would say it's, it wasn't appropriated in the right places to be used. Like I said earlier, we had a couple things that money was getting in there, but every year it was consistently just not getting spent. So this year coming up, we've adjusted it.
So would I assume that, let's say we gave $330,000, you're giving $30,000 back now, will the money we fund next year, will it be $300,000?
It's by statute has to remain the same. I think there's one, it's 122C, 115. I think there's one area that gives a small piece about.
So what sets that number that we fund in the statute?
It's a maintenance of effort funding, where we have to fund the same amount as the other counties that are part of the Cardinal Innovations Collaborative. Ideally, you're appropriating money that's supporting the services needed by your community, but they're not drawing down enough funds to fully spend, and it's coming back on us to come up with some more mental health services,
Per your
which
comment,
is
us going into the mental health business.
very frustrating to county government.
The old model, for the last 25 years or 20 years, the maintenance of effort money went in there, but Orange Person Chatham Mental Health, when it was actually the mental health organization, administered it back out to these different programs. So when Cardinal got it, they're doing, like he said a minute ago, the Medicare, Medicaid type thing where they're getting the reimbursements. So what this is not his decision, this is the board's decision. So Gordon, you can listen to this, but the deal is now that they're taking the money and giving it back to us, but we don't have personnel in place to administer this, is what Heidi's getting at, that we're getting this money back and having to do these programs, but we're not mental health experts either. So Cardinal OPC at one time had somebody that looked after the local stuff. So they had somebody that knew who needed, Freedom House needed it, or a clinic over here needed it, or somebody else needed it that was working directly back. So they've changed the way they're doing it, but what they're doing is we're having to make a decision now on the local level. And, you know, I don't know whether you need a committee from a person from the health department, a person from social services, and a person from some other department, or somebody from some of these non-profits to look at where we really do need to place this money. We got this, I think we did a good job of what we got back originally, but now we got another 30,000. Now, who needs that the worst? You gonna take your time to do it? Sybil gonna do it? Finance director wanna do it? Clerk wanna do it? Whose responsibility is it to see that we are doing it like it really needs to be done? Ultimately, it's coming back to us. I understand that. But we're having to spend staff time to do something that we didn't have to do before. Yes, we've got to appropriate the money, and I think we did a good job of spending it today like we need to, but this is an issue that Gordon needs to talk to that board about. Is this the way it's being done everywhere else, and is it creating the same problems in those counties as it is here? Some county like Orange, it probably not, because they probably got a person dedicated to do that over there. Because if we gotten back 300,000, they probably got back $1.5 million or $2 million. I'm just guessing, but proportionally. So that's kind of where that's at. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of history. I'm not fussing with him for bringing the money back and telling us that's the way it's got to be done, because he's doing what he's been told he's supposed to do.
Sure.
It's different in every county. Some counties have kept all of their maintenance of effort money and do it themselves. Others have, back and forth. I've only had 2 counties that had some underspent, so not everybody has money coming back at the end. There were 2 programs that had been historically funded for a long time that just weren't drawing down the money like they needed to. We've addressed that this year coming up.
I amend my original comment to say we should invest in our children's mental health.
There you go.
From the Cardinal standpoint, as you well know, that's a newly organized, constituted, and approved board, and it's going through a huge learning curve, and myself included, and I'm not the only one. Person County is not the only county in the 20-county catchment area that has this problem. However, along those lines, number one, both Cardinal and this board is going to follow statute, and we're going to go through with that. But to hear from the small rural areas that will have this problem and some of the larger ones will not, that's why we're there, and that's what we're going to do. And that concern has already been voiced but not addressed, so it will be, and hopefully soon. We have a meeting beginning Friday of this week and continuing on into Saturday of this week. While you guys are watching basketball, I'll be in Charlotte with Cardinal. But no, it's not one that we aren't paying attention to, and one that I'll be glad to continue to express when we do meet.
I appreciate your service and being on the board too.
Okay.
So we've got an additional $30,343, and I don't feel comfortable. Yeah, and the other thing that I would like to bring up, we hear from Ray quite often concerning the amount of kids that we put in the care of other homes because of drug problems. Is there something that we can do to help promote getting more families or more homes for these children within Person County? So I think that being an issue that you've already brought up before the board, is there some way that we can work as a county with this $30,000 to help get these kids into a home? Because we know that a certain percentage of these people that are in homes of this nature continue the cycle when they come back. So I think it would be a big help for our county to get more people involved, better homes, or more homes that are not in this situation. So I personally would like to see if we could utilize some of it for that benefit.
And could I ask a question too, and maybe of Ms. Pickett? In getting that JCPC budget, did we not trim $2,000 or $3,000 off that?
We trimmed off the administration budget and moved it into programs for children, but we didn't take any funding out of it. It's $222 more, actually.
No, okay. I thought if there was something there that we could do in support of those programs with some of this money, because...
What about training with Dewey? What about training for your deputies and stuff? One time we were doing some type of training so they understood how to handle people with mental health issues.
I don't know whether Cardinal still offers that program or not.
That's one of the things the steering committee was talking about a while ago. It's a 40-hour training, and currently we're trying to get one brought here because the EMS wants to do it. Me, as far as that, 40 hours, you know, we got to pay that for the training, but we also got to pay 40 hours for somebody to work in that spot. So we're limited on how many we can send at a time. What that's going to do is...
Yeah, I think paying overtime is an example of something that I would be supportive of to help get that done.
All right, listen to you talk now. I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up or not, but other counties charge us for transporting Person County residents. Is that some of the money could be used? Because we pay Orange County several $1,000s a year for transporting Person County on top of what we transport.
Who do we ask to get approval of the use of these funds? Like that question, who makes that decision?
It's a local decision. That's why we've been more thoughtful about trying to not push it all back, but give you more control locally instead. It's been historic as long as I've been involved. It's just kind of, you set up a program and it always got funded, and next year it always got funded, and it just kind of went like that.
Right.
And for the last couple of years, I've been trying to just say, you know, to Commissioner Clayton's point, yeah, let's get some people together and a lot of other communities do that. You get people together, they sort of talk about, here's what I'm seeing and how can we work together and what's the best use of this, instead of just saying, oh, this guy got money last year, we'll give him money again. And that's why, again, not pushing back, but it's your money, it's your community, and I don't want to come in and tell you what to do with it and how to spend it.
But I could
I've got
say
sort of parameters, I'd like to see it do these things.
Transportation costs, JCPC funding match, I mean, all these things we're hearing, you're not saying no.
Yeah, if you can relate it to mental health, substance use disorder, or intellectual and developmental disabilities and help support the services that we provide, I'm going to be okay with it.
Ron had a question.
And, you know, I think it's a very loose by statute.
Okay.
A continuation of the manager's question, do we understand you to say that this board has complete discretion in use of the funds so long as, in their opinion, it is devoted to the purposes you outlined?
Yes, it's been, you know, like I said, other counties have maintained the entire amount of their maintenance effort, and some have sort of divvied up half and half. They give half to Cardinal for certain programs, and the other half they do things to help support.
You suggested so long as it is devoted to ... Can you cite for us the statutory or regulatory requirements which describe so long as it is devoted to?
It's in 122C, and I think the 115 is the subsection, but off the top of my head, I couldn't. And like I said, I
Can
know
you
it's
send
very
that to
loose.
us so that we make sure that we comply with those rules?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So that's why I just, you know, I have generate things I'd like to see, and I know those, like the training I mentioned, that covers a lot, and it's more of a community base, and it gets started, and it starts conversations, and it starts changing the way people think about trauma and substance use disorder. And I think that can go a long way to help address stigma and certainly get into some other issues down the road. But, you know, community change is what we're looking for. Any further questions?
It's the first year we've
Time you
had
come,
money
you got to check
returned
to
from
make sure
Cardinal.
next time you.
Well, that's part of the reorganizational effort too, from what I understand it, because that money has been going someplace else and not being returned as it should have been. So.
And, you know, it's from, I think there's counties that give 50,000, and there's some that give, you know, well over almost 2 million. So it just varies. It's all over the place.
It's a good recommendation. Let staff bring back a suggestion.
And I'll be happy to work with you guys on whatever you need from me to help. I can even get with some training people at the corporate office and try to help them set some stuff up also.
Sounds good, thank you.
And I'd also like to say, totally off subject, but Judy Eckers, I will miss her also. She's been very good, easy to work with. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So no motion required, just you guys
It
got
was
staff
just
direction. Got it.
Informational, yeah.
All right. Item number 8, request for approval of new audit firm's proposal auditing. Ms. Amy.
Good morning. You should all see in your packets an abstract that includes my recommendation of a new firm to perform the county's annual financial audit for fiscal years ending 2018, 2019, and 2020. Due to new reporting requirements that are causing county audits across the state to increase, we made the decision to bid this contract out to make sure that we were getting the most competitive estimate for these services. A request for proposal was released on February the 15th, 2018, and 4 audit firms responded, including the county's current auditor. You should also have a bid summary that offers a comparison of the 4 bids over several categories. After thorough analysis of each proposal, my recommendation is to award Elliott Davis, a firm out of Raleigh, North Carolina, to provide these services since they presented the best responsive bid. Their estimate to perform the audit for Person County for fiscal year ending 2018 is $9,000 less than our current auditor's bid and $38,345 less over the 3-year period. Other variables besides the estimated costs that were in their favor included their close proximity to Person County, the fact that they are a larger firm which potentially offers additional audit staffing resources, the positive reference from another county they are currently serving, and their overall record to complete financial reports and submit them to the Local Government Commission prior to November 30th compared to the other bidders. Unless you have any questions regarding their proposal or my recommendation, I would ask that you approve the audit firm's 3-year proposal and approve execution of the first year's contract for reporting year 2018.
So I imagine it's their national headquarters says Atlanta, Georgia. That's not as close as Oxford.
No.
You said they're close proximity to Person County, right?
Yes,
So
Raleigh.
They have an office in Raleigh.
Yeah, they have a satellite office in Raleigh.
Why would we do a 3-year when it's our first year working with them? Is that because we got
Well,
the
you
best
only
dates?
actually approve the, you only actually do a hard approval of the first year's contract. You have to approve that by statute every year. So if they didn't, abide by their proposal for the 3 years, then you would not have to approve that second year's contract. It's more of a, you are sort of giving them some room to do a 3-year, but you're not
locked in.
fully committed to doing that. You don't have to.
What would have been this year's auditor's cost? What did we pay them this year?
I don't have that in front of me, but it was higher than what the bids came in for this next year. I want to say I was already in 60-some thousand or more for their contract. So it didn't surprise me to see that come in even higher when it was rebid.
Okay.
What was, you said late submittals, was that late submittal on the RFP?
The late submittals I'm referring to is our actual financial report, our audit report. It has to be submitted to the Local Government Commission every year. The due date, the Local Government Commission's due date is actually October 31st, but due to all the additional requirements, there are very few counties that actually meet that deadline. The last couple of years, our audit has been submitted very late, and, part of that, there could be many reasons for that, but our current auditor has had some staffing resource issues, and I'm sure that has contributed some too. But that's one of the parameters that I really heavily looked at because I really would like to get that report to LGC. They're really pushing for that, for auditors to get them the reports earlier. And when I looked at the record compared to the bidders, Elliott Davis did have a very good record for getting that in at a reasonable time.
Did we incur any penalties or for being late?
No, you don't really incur any monetary penalties. They basically send you a letter to say, send us a letter to tell us how you're going to try and address and get these reports in, by the deadline. And so it's just more of an accounting issue. It's not, there's no severe penalties associated with late submittals.
I looked at this wrong. That's why I said Atlanta, Georgia. I thought you were recommending the lowest one, which was Malden Jenkins, but no,
No.
you recommend Elliott Davis.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. There were several reasons why I didn't recommend.
That's why you looked
the-
at me when I said Atlanta, Georgia, huh?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I wasn't exactly sure, but yeah, part of the problem with them is they are so far away. They don't have a satellite office here in North Carolina, the one
Yep,
from
yep.
Georgia. And so I felt very uncomfortable to recommend them, even though they did submit the lowest bid. And they have a very small presence here in North Carolina.
How long will we work with Jim?
This will be the 20th.
That's-
We've been with him for 20 years.
That's, I mean.
This was a
that's-
very difficult
this
decision
is-
on my
and
part.
Obviously, you're the one making the recommendation because you're the one that's having to work with them, and I respect your recommendation. It's just, I just hate that they've been a partner with us for a very,
Yes.
very long time, and I know firsthand that they're having some challenges
Yes.
over there, and it's unfortunate, nothing of their own doing, but that's.
This was hard.
Yes.
This was hard for me. I have a very good relationship with our current auditor. And I have had a long conversation with him about this. And, he's very understanding about why I had to sort of make this recommendation. But at the end of the day, I have to look at I have to
Dollars and
compare
cents.
and
Yep.
go for the most competitive one. And to me, this was the best competitive bid that we
Okay.
had.
So this is not one of those things that we're caught up in having to pick the lowest bidder, huh?
You're not required to pick the lowest
Best
bidder.
one for
You're
this.
required to pick the best responsive bid. And in my opinion, Elliott Davis provided that. Can I answer any other questions about that?
Move for approval.
Okay, we got a motion on the table to approve the new audit firm. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, Region K Agent Advisory Council, Ms. Reeves.
Gentlemen, I'm requesting action by the board as you do appropriate. For the planning board, excuse me, we have one position available. We do have one application that has been submitted from an interested citizen. Her name is Tabitha George, who is requesting appointment. I would ask what is the desired board for the planning board appointment.
No, non-competitive.
No, sir, there's only one application and one open seat, and it's actually been open for a little while.
Got a motion on the table to approve the candidate. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Board of Adjustment.
The Board of Adjustment, we have had an opening for an alternate. Now, an alternate is not one of the voting members. They serve as an alternate and is only called upon by the board to serve if there is not a quorum, right? So we have had that position available for a while, but Commissioner Jeffers had asked several months ago for staff to look into a complaint that was received related to one of the members of the current Board of Adjustment not attending the meetings. So Lori Oakley has confirmed, since she was the planning director, that Ms. Felicia Swan has not attended the meetings. And then keep in mind that they do not meet monthly. They meet as needed when they have a case before them. So they don't necessarily meet on a monthly basis. But we have tracked her attendance since she has been appointed, and that was included in your packet for your information. So you as the Board of Commissioners certainly have the authority to rescind Ms. Swan's appointment if you feel like her excessive absenteeism has been detrimental to the Board of Adjustment. So we have recruited an application. Mr. Andy Withers has submitted an application. He can certainly be appointed to the alternate position if you want to leave Ms. Swan on there. If you would like to exercise your authority and rescind her appointment, you can actually have the option to appoint Mr. Withers to serve out that term to fulfill that unexpired term through June 2019.
What is the term for the alternate?
It's unspecified. It is no term related to it.
I got a question. If this board meets and you have a member on that has a conflict and they recuse themselves, if they attend that meeting and they ask to be recused, does that count as the majority of the board meeting so that they can have an official? See, if the member just doesn't show up, then you don't have a quorum. So if the member shows up and this board has a quorum and one of us recuses ourselves and another member happen not to be here, we still in session. You know, that doesn't become an issue of being able to meet. And I think I got wind of a situation where one of the board members didn't come because they had a conflict. Well, what they did was messed up the board having a quorum to even meet.
You are correct on your law. In order to have a quorum, you must have a quorum at the beginning of the meeting. If a person declares that they have a conflict, that does not affect the existence of a quorum. A case pending now has been going on for over a year, revolves around that issue. Our present Board of Adjustment rules requires a quorum of 4 of the 5 members. That's an extraordinary number, but it's in our law, our local law. So we would have to have 4 of 5 in attendance to have a quorum. If then one of the 4 fails, declares a conflict, we could still continue. We could still continue. I have some concerns legally on all the pending issues, but particularly the one that's been going on for a year, that we really ought to have an alternate, so we have a potential someone to step in if we need that person to step in. I have no opinion, obviously, on whether
Let me ask you one step further then. Okay, if somebody recuses themselves and it creates a problem, can the alternate step in at that point?
I believe that they could. I believe that they could, yes.
This question is from Ms. Oakley. I understand that we had a meeting recently and Ms. Swan did not show up, and if I understand correctly, through just communications with a member, the chamber was about full of people that wanted to talk, and we didn't have a quorum, so we had to basically move it to next month or a future meeting.
That is correct. We received an email from her as we remind board members prior to the meeting, because she has missed the last 6 meetings, all of 2017 and then this meeting in 2018. And we sent out an email and she stated she would be there. We did have one member recuse themselves that we knew they would not be there because they had a conflict. And then we had one other absence, and without her being there, we did not have a quorum to hold the meeting. So the meeting is now being held in April.
Yep. As noted by Commissioner Jeffers earlier, with the amount of absenteeism, it would be, I'm not making this in the form of a motion, I'm just giving them my opinion that we take Ms. Swan off and appoint Mr. Withers in her stead.
I think you let him fill out her time.
To 2019, and then we actively try to find an alternate. That would be my suggestion.
Alternate or replacement?
No, I will replace her with Withers, and then we still have an open spot then for an alternate. Because we're...
Oh, okay, I got it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. That's fine.
So I'll make that in form of a motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to replace Ms.
To rescind Mrs.
Swan.
Swan's appointment and to put Mr. Withers in her position until June 30th, 2019.
And continue to look for an alternate for that term also.
Yeah.
We're actively recruiting for that position. We have open positions listed on the website, and then we advertise once, twice, 3 times a year. And until it's filled, it will be included in the advertisement.
All right. So we have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to ask a question to make sure that I understand, particularly for the pending case that we have. So the proposal is to remove an existing member, to replace that existing member, thus remaining that we only have the 5 permanent members and would not have an alternate available. Is that right?
That's correct, because you don't have a quorum anyway if she doesn't come.
That's right. I'd urge the board not related to this, that if we can get one more, it would make us much more legally safe to be able to carry on the business, because we have some major issues going on. So I'd urge the board and the staff to look hard for
So
one
did we
more
ever look
person.
at changing that from 4 to 3 to make a quorum? Since
Yes,
it's a
sir.
local ordinance?
That will be my recommendation, but not until this pending case is over.
Gotcha.
Just further discussion, how would the board feel about, and I don't know how Ms. Swan would feel about it, being an alternate until the end of June, so changing it so that we do have the alternate, knowing her absentee record?
That's fine until we can, because it's unspecified term, so we can remove her anytime.
So would you
I'll
like to?
amend my motion to reflect that.
Okay, so putting Mr. Withers in Ms. Swan's position and moving Ms. Swan to an alternate for an undetermined amount of time, and any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Region K agent.
There have been 3 vacancies on the Region K Agent Advisory Council, and Ms. Jillian Hardin, Director of the Area Agency for Carter Regional Council of Government, has recruited from Person County interested citizens through our senior center, I believe, to fill these vacancies. She had submitted a letter to our chairman requesting appointment of these 3 individuals. I do not have applications for them. It is my understanding she's seeking applications to be turned in just because that's a normal process, but we did not have those for today's meeting.
I'll vouch for all 3 of them. I'll move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve the 3 persons submitted. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Number 10, call for public hearing related to intent to sell home health and hospice. County Attorney Ron Aycock.
Mr. Chairman and Board, you previously have expressed your intent to explore the possibility of selling the home health and hospice agency that the county has. This proposal before you is only one step of a long and continuing process for public involvement in your decision process. This simply calls for a public hearing at the April 9th meeting to hear from the public as to their thoughts on whether or not you ought to sell. If you decide to move forward from there, there will be other opportunities for public input in the process as you move forward.
Any questions for Ron? Do we need a motion to?
Yes.
Okay. Entertain a motion to put this public hearing on the April commissioner meeting. Okay, I have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, ayes have it. It'll be on the April meeting. Chairman's report. I sat down here, and I know a lot of you guys have been following this all along, and we had Hall's Agribusiness presented a award for Best Adaptive Reuse Project. So I'd like to point out that Hall's Way has gotten some state kudos for Main Street, North Carolina, for the way that they took Hall's Way and reused that property and put some commercial space in there. And we appreciate all that our businesses in Person County do to invest in the county. I'd also like to tell everyone on March 17th at 3 p.m., thanks to a lot of hard work by the vice chairman here. April, excuse me, I'm behind. I was taking notes as we were going through the meeting. So April 17th at 3 p.m. at the museum, and in case of bad weather, it'll be here in this auditorium, the road dedication from the state for Corporal Guy D. Winstead. And so, like I said, Gordon worked diligently with the family and with the state to get that application put through, and we appreciate all that he did and the time that he put into getting this thing. I also want to thank the family for bringing this to the forefront and making us aware of the heroic efforts that Mr. Winstead went through, and we appreciate all the effort that everyone put into it. So thank you, Gordon, and thank you, family. Vice Chair.
I think the ceremony will speak for itself. It's very noteworthy and honorable. Thank you.
Commissioner Puryear.
Just want to say I had an opportunity to go on a rare trip, and being invited to the White House with the other county commissioners in the state was a distinct honor and a privilege. It is, having been on this board for several years now, and this being the first time that the administration has invited county commissioners to the White House to, as a whole, to increase transparency and dialogue. I was really put away with how hard they were, what effort they were putting into, not just going to North Carolina, but going to other states as well. And had the privilege of meeting the Vice President of the United States and a few other distinct individuals. So I would say it was an experience that I probably will never forget.
I could back up and echo that. I was not really thinking about that, but it was very worth the effort. And the real takeaway to me was the contacts that we've gained, the people that we now have, I believe, an open avenue to reach out to, and primarily in things that we're concerned with. Infrastructure was an item that kept coming up. The issue with opioids that we've just heard from here, the problem that we have, it's on the front burners in Washington, and again, it was very worthwhile. I'm very reluctant to get involved with some of these, these state and county organizations. I go to those things, and a lot of times there are no takeaways. I go home basically with nothing. I don't feel that way with this event, and it was a rare opportunity, and it was very worthwhile. And I think as we go forward, we'll try to become more engaged with those people that we've given the contacts to and through, and perhaps make some good things happen in Person County.
Commissioner Clayton.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Powell. I think it was a well worthwhile meeting. I mean, I get beat up for going to too many meetings, but hey, and some of them, maybe you get there and they don't turn out to be what you think they ought to be, but they had a panel discussion at the end of the day that day, and after we got through, I did get to, and I brought up, I stressed Person County's economic development to that group, and after the meeting was over, there was a guy by the name, and I hope I'm saying his name correct, was Klutz, K-L-U-T-T-Z, and he was with the Department of Commerce, and I got to talk to him after the meeting, and I think people like that, knowing that Person County exists and trying to get us on their radar is a big help. Also, I talked to another guy by the name of Doug Little with the Department of Energy, and I think anytime Commissioner Powell said, anytime you can get people on that level to at least, maybe if they see something, at least they know that Person County is out here and that we got some resources and that we're trying to do some things. You heard both of those commissioners were up there, but you heard a few negative things, but most people were trying to get the federal government to listen to what we're saying on the local level. And one more thing I'll throw in there, that I was at the legislative conference the week before that. Big deal has been made with this waters of the U.S. You don't hear it on the local level much, but the Corps of Engineers tried to regulate a pothole. If there was a pothole in the road and some water was in it, they were going to regulate it. And that's been an ongoing fight for the last 7 or 8 years, and right now it looks like it's been pushed back some, and, well, in fact, a lot. And it was in litigation, but they also relented on the fact. So, but it got to the point one time, if it ran out of a road ditch, they were going to regulate it. And, you know, we need to be aware of things like that. It costs local government a pile of money to do what the feds and the state want us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson.
Yep, so on the NACO Board of Directors, we got to meet with the intergovernmental relations guy for the president, and he went through with the infrastructure issues and kind of the cost share that they're going to have. I don't know exactly how it's going to affect us since we don't do roads and bridges. So I don't know how much local input we will have on that, but also was able to set up some meetings with our congressional staff and our 2 senators. But the snow that was predicted to come in that day kind of canceled that, and so we were going to reschedule that. Jimmy and I still were able to have breakfast with Congressman Walker and kind of go through our project here, and we were able to catch Tillis and Burr in the hallway to kind of let them know what we got going on, and he gave us the contact to make when we get ready to reschedule the meeting, to hopefully have them present at the meeting, and where we're not just meeting with staff. So we're ready to make that call when we can set up the delegation to go.
All right. And again, thank you guys for going. I had a conflict of interest, and I appreciate the fact that y'all took time out of your schedule to make the trip and meet up there. Ms. York?
Commissioners, I'm about a quarter of the way through departmental budget reviews, so I'll be locked away this week trying to get the majority of those analyzed and figure out some recommendations for you all on that. But I can say that nobody has given me any reductions for next year.
Surprising.
Everybody is asking for more, trying to identify their needs and work as efficiently as possible. So I'll keep in touch with you as those numbers start to become a little more clear. It's going to be a very challenging budget year, as you have gotten a glimpse of today. Also wanted to let you know that the Economic Development Commission is holding their meeting next Tuesday. That's their monthly meeting. So next Tuesday at 4 o'clock at PCC is their regular monthly meeting. And that's all I have for now.
Be sure Commissioner Perrier understands that you'll be locked away.
Yes.
And you won't get any phone calls during those.
If he needs to interrupt me to get Commissioner Powell out of a security check. I always take else calls.
All right. Thank you all. I appreciate everything. Is there anything else we need to discuss before we adjourn? I'd entertain a motion to close then.
So moved.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?